Hello again to another Agakala Reacts. Excuse my voice. I'm a bit sick. I still have to record. So, on the 4th January 1847, Samuel Colt sold his first revolver pistol to the United States government. And because of that, we're gonna watch Samuel Colt inventing the gun that won the West from Learn Something. And let's just get into it and let's just watch. And I have not prepped my video.
God made man. Samuel Colt made them equal.
Well,
While nobody really knows who came up with the saying, it's fair to say that Samuel Colt would agree with the adage. Going a step further to say for himself, the good people of this world are very far from being satisfied with each other, and my arms are the best peacemakers. Samuel Colt was an American inventor and entrepreneur that showed his intelligence from an early age. But from his humble beginnings as a troublemaker in school to becoming one of the richest men in America, his path was a tumultuous one. Getting kicked out of school, losing his company, and constantly struggling to sell what would later be known as an innovative firearm design that would go down in history. This is the story of Samuel
1847,
Colt, and this is Learn
so
Something
it's
New.
not even
Now, a lot of
200
the time
years
with
old,
famous
huh?
industrialists from the 1800s, you can essentially skip over their childhoods. Sometimes because the information has simply been lost to history, and other times because it's quite frankly uninteresting. But Samuel Colt seems to have been an exception. He was a man who displayed brilliance from a remarkably young age. Samuel Colt was born on July 19, 1814 in Hartford, Connecticut. He was the son of textile manufacturer Christopher Colt and his wife Sarah. One of Sam's earliest and most prized possessions was a flintlock pistol that belonged to his grandfather, who had served as an officer in George Washington's Continental Army during the American Revolution. At age 11, Colt was
so the
sent
pistols
to
were there
Glastonbury,
before.
Connecticut,
I
to
don't know
live
much
and
about
work on the
weapons, so
farm
I
of
don't
a
know.
family friend. While there, Colt became fascinated with the mechanics behind new technology, frequently reading the Compendium of Knowledge, an early form of the encyclopedia, as well as articles about Robert Fulton, the inventor of the steamboat. When he turned 15, he moved back home and began working in his father's textile processing plant in Ware, Massachusetts, where he honed his skills in the use of machine tools and manufacturing processes. In his spare time, he was experimenting with gunpowder charges, setting off small explosions on the nearby Ware Lake. He also filled his time dismantling and reassembling different objects to learn how they functioned. Recognizing his son's intelligence and interest, in 1830, his father sent him to a private academy in Massachusetts. But while he did perform well in classes, he was consistently in trouble while attending the academy for conducting unapproved demonstrations of explosive devices, one of which occurred during the school's 1830 4th of July celebration, which caused a fire on campus. The academy expelled Colt for this, sending him home to his father, who then sent him off to learn the trade of a seaman. Little did he know how impactful this decision would be on his son's life. In the fall of 1830, 16-year-old Colt was working hard as an apprentice on the ship and enjoying himself as he was about to study the ship's design. As the ship sailed, Colt became fascinated with the ship's wheel, which could spin or be locked in position with a
that's
clutch.
what
This
Colt
inspired
with
him
the...
to think about how he could translate the technology to a firearm,
revolver.
where a single-shot pistol could be adapted to fire multiple rounds in quick succession. As the ship was making its return trip to North America, Colt spent his time carving out a 6-barrel cylinder, locking pin, and hammer out of wood. This prototype featured multiple rotating barrels, though he would later opt for a rotating cylinder containing multiple bullet chambers to reduce the gun's weight and size. His goal was to make it so that, no matter which way the wheel was spun, each spoke could be in direct line with a clutch that could be set to hold it. And thus, the idea for the revolver was conceived. As soon as he got home to his father, he showed him the wooden models, explaining the design to his dad. His father agreed to finance the production of 2 pistols and 1 rifle based on this design. One of these pistols failed to fire, and the other one exploded, but the rifle actually worked well. Colt tried to argue with his father that the failures didn't represent a problem with the design, but rather with the poor craftsmanship and cheap materials. But regardless, his father refused to put any more money toward the idea. But Colt wasn't willing to give up so easily, leaving his family behind to tour the country, scrounging up money by giving public demonstrations of a new medical technology, nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas, adopting the identity of Dr. S. Colt of New York, London, and Calcutta, who had a specialty in the administration of nitrous oxide for medical purposes, obviously fake titles. He gave people doses of nitrous oxide for a fee, often performing dramatic displays before crowds of people, which allowed him to perfect his sales skills. With the money he saved from his days on the road, Colt was able to have a prototype gun built by a professional gunsmith. He made this version of his gun so that the action of cocking the gun's hammer rotated the cylinder to align the next cartridge to be fired with the gun's barrel, which gave it a much higher success rate than his earlier versions. But Colt never claimed to have invented the revolver, however, acknowledging that his design was more innovation than invention, because it improved upon the revolving flintlock design that was already being used in rifles at the time, having been patented by a Boston inventor named Elisha Collier in 1814. Colt did receive a patent of his own for his revolving cylinder pistol on February 25, 1836, which in its description described the design as allowing great rapidity in the succession of discharges for the user. With the help of several influential investors impressed with the revolver, including the U.S. Patent Office superintendent at the time, Colt managed to open the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company in Paterson, New Jersey in 1836 to produce his guns. In a letter he wrote to his father that same year, he talks about taking inspiration from some of the other inventions of the time, which were beginning to be built on an assembly line. Colt wanted to do the same, creating an efficient factory which was able to churn out over 1,000 guns by the end of 1837, and it seemed like things were prime and ready to take off for Colt. Yet, despite his factory being able to craft many of his guns, and his desire to constantly tweak and improve upon the design, very few were actually selling. His future as a successful entrepreneur seemed doomed if he wasn't able to start moving inventory fast. Colt thought he might be able to save his company if he secured a government contract, so he visited the office of the U.S. Secretary of War, the predecessor to the modern-day Secretary of Defense, but they determined that his firearms were too innovative and therefore had the potential to be unreliable. After a few years of economic downturns, his company was forced to close down, and every asset they owned were sold off to the highest bidder. But in one of the smartest business moves he had ever made, Colt had been putting all of his patents in his own name rather than in the name of his business, so he didn't lose them. And in 1842, when the Mexican-American War broke out, the US government came back to him asking for 1,000 revolvers. Happy to oblige with the request, he opened Colt's manufacturing company, and by the end of 1855, they were producing 150 firearms a day. It was during this time that he was busy with another venture as well. It was in 1842 he landed a government contract to perfect an underwater explosive mine to protect US harbors from invasion by sea. To set off his mines remotely, Colt teamed up with the inventor of the telegraph, Samuel Morse, to invent a waterproof cable for transmitting an electrical charge under the ocean. Morse would later go on to use this design to run cables across lakes, rivers, and even the Atlantic Ocean. And although in a 4th of July demonstration, the mines were able to perform extremely well, impressing the Navy, the funding for the project was blocked with John Quincy Adams saying that they were not fair and honest warfare. But regardless, Colt had built a great relationship with the military, one that would serve him well with many contracts in the coming decades. But because of the struggles in his entrepreneurial journey, Colt didn't marry until 1856 when he was 42 years old. And when he did eventually tie the knot with Elizabeth Hart Jarvis, it was in a ceremony overlooking his firearms factory in Connecticut. Though they were only together 6 years before Colt's death, the couple had 5 children, only one of which, Caldwell Hart Colt, survived beyond infancy. Samuel Colt had amassed a fortune, but he barely had time to enjoy as well. He died at the age of 47 years old from chronic rheumatoid arthritis at his Connecticut mansion on January 10, 1862. His net worth at the time of his death was estimated at $15 million, or about $400 million in today's money. Soon after her husband's death, Elizabeth Colt had inherited a controlling interest in Colt's manufacturing company. In 1865, her brother Richard Jarvis took over as president of the company, and together, they oversaw it into the early 20th century. Elizabeth Colt would eventually sell the company to a group of investors in 1901, but during the course of Samuel Colt's lifetime, Colt's manufacturing company had produced more than 400,000 firearms and remains in business today, having manufactured more than 30 million pistols and rifles since its official founding in 1855. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.
That was good. That was interesting. I was just going to ask if they're still in operation. Like I said in the beginning, I didn't really know much about weapons. Obviously, everyone knows a revolver from westerns and all that. Because that's what they were mostly showing, the westerns, isn't it? the revolving barrel. That's what it's called, a barrel. There's 6 bullets, isn't it? Something else? No. Wow. The man was young though when he died. And it's just kinda sad that out of 6 children, or 5 children, just 1 survived. It happens though, back then, isn't it? Very interesting person, very, kind of like, since the childhood must have been. I wonder what would happen if you'd be more kind of like, more well behaving, if you ever actually come to the making of the revolver, if you didn't go to learn how to be a sailor. Okay. Do you... Well, I don't think I ever had a real gun in my hands. But I'm not American or Swiss. And I never hunted. So, excuse me. So if you're hunting... excuse me guys, I'm still sick though. Did you ever use the Colt revolver or something like that and shooting for the thing? I would like to try and go to the shooting range one day and try out some weapons. Gonna see how it is. Don't wanna buy them, but try them out and I knew how to use them. That would be a good idea. Alright, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.